What's up, PlayStation Universe, and welcome to episode 5 of PlayStation Fix. My name is Will Robinson, and today we have the entire force that is Wake Force on this podcast.
Burn, 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 burn.
You.
So the rest of the team, we'll introduce them now. First off is Adam Byrne.
Hi there.
And we got Kyle Prahl.
I'm a sucker for a nice Irish accent.
And
Oh, you
Ernest
know it.
Lin.
Hi.
All right.
Hello,
Hi.
hello, friends of Earth.
All right. So how's everybody doing?
Good, tired.
Yeah?
As usual.
All right.
All right. Well, we got a good amount of news to talk about. It comparatively seemed like a slow week because we just came off of Paris Games Week not so
Harry.
long ago.
Yeah, it's hard to stand up to that.
But there's still some pretty
Yeah.
good news topics that came out. We'll start off with a little teaser, which was Star Wars Battlefront got a teaser trailer for Battle of Jakku. So everybody got to watch that, correct?
Yes.
Indeed.
So
Jakku?
you could have blinked and you could have missed it.
I know. I was
It's
just going to say I
very
didn't so much watch it as like it kind of hit me in the face as it went
Yeah.
by. I went, hey, what was that?
It still had a lot of stuff packed into it, or a lot of like momentum and excitement. I thought, even though it
Yeah.
was really short.
It was pretty. Yes.
Yeah, like the whole
Yeah.
thing was just like battle happening. You're like, okay, what's going on? And all of a sudden, a Star Destroyer is just falling out of the sky.
Which is interesting, of course, because the scene from the movie or the scene from the trailer shows that Star Destroyer being half buried in sand. So it's interesting in the sense that it's a precursor. I wonder how much the battle is actually going to what it's going to belie about the plot of the movie. If only because Star Wars. I mean, what we've played of Battlefront so far, and what we remember from Battlefront back in the day, is that it doesn't really have story sequences, right? Like in these multiplayer battles, there might be a progression of things. Things might move around in the sky, or hallmark events might happen in the middle of a match, but they've never really told a story. So I'm curious to know how they sort of bridge into the movie, because that's kind of how they're marketing it, and I'm not really sure that.
Yeah, well,
they're
this
gonna
Right.
this
follow through
trailer
on
opened, didn't it open saying 29 years before The Force Awakens?
Right.
So it's like
It's like
it
right
doesn't really need to
after-
tie in. It just has to
it's-
be some big battle that happens. There doesn't have
Right.
to be
It's
any
pretty
story.
much soon after Return of the Jedi in that timeline.
Okay.
So I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect anything.
Yeah, I don't think
story
they'll.
really.
I think they're trying to avoid spoiling, and I mean, Disney's been really, really adamant about trying to lock down any kind of like.
That'd be interesting if
stuff.
anybody at DICE actually knows anything about The Force Awakens.
I think they
I-
probably know.
I
what
would
they
say
felt
so.
they needed to know, but probably not a word more than that. Like one
need
of
to
those
know
things-
basis.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why did the Battle of Jakku?
But I mean, can you imagine like the embargo forms and like disclaimers that they had to sign? Like
Well, what's-
sign
Give
their
up newborn
soul away.
children and everything.
Right.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because the big story out there now is about this kid Daniel Fleetwood who got to see the movie early because he has sickle cell carcinoma, so he's a big Star Wars fan, and they're not sure if he's going to make it to the premiere of the movie. So J.J. Abrams showed him an unedited cut of the movie, and he's probably one of maybe 5 people in the world who have seen that. But I'm not super read up on the story. I think he's an adolescent boy, not an adult. So what kind of embargo is he under?
And like, what would he
Yeah.
care? Because he's got sickle cell leukemia. So I mean,
Just
think
captured the
he's
torrent of it.
not really going to care if he's banned from getting like a Star Wars toy or something.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
a great gesture, though.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's pretty
I think
awesome
J-
that they did that.
Yeah, didn't JJ do that for the? I think he did that for the last Star Trek film.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
JJ's a
It was-
good guy.
He is.
it's a good
He always,
fellow.
he always came across with a really authentic personality in most promo videos, and just a friendly dude.
Yeah, but so
Most deaf.
Oh God, I totally just fumbled my thought. So Star Wars, the movie Force Awakens, is coming out next month on December 17th. I want to say, right?
I thought it was 18th, but then a lot of theaters are doing.
Oh, for like
the evening
17th, like
before the
midnight
17th.
release or something.
Yeah, I think it's like evening, like 8 or 9 p.m. A lot of theaters are starting
Okay,
to show it. Yeah.
right. And then this is coming out December 8th is when the DLC is
DLC.
hitting for this. So
Oh, okay.
Plenty of
Right, 'cause the
time
release is
for-
November.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. That's gonna be here already. Not that far
God.
off.
Yeah, that's just 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
And we're constantly reminded of it from all these little teasers and news tidbits and.
Okay, so here's one for you. This is a bit of a break from the news story, but with all the hype around Fallout 4 at the moment, I mean, all the talk the last few months has been how Star Wars and Fallout 4 are going to dominate this month. I think Fallout 4 hurts Star Wars a little bit just by virtue of it coming out earlier. And I don't think
certainly.
That's not really the topic of conversation right now. Like, it's kind of just assumed that both are going to be sales juggernauts, and they will be, relatively speaking. But I do think, on its own, Star Wars could have sold maybe a couple million more units had Fallout 4 not be like... Right. I mean, that is going to have an iron-tight grip on people's attention, even a week or two later as Star Wars.
Yeah, it's weird. You'd think... Yeah, go ahead, Adam.
I think we've got to be mindful as well that we're sort of in this echo chamber of like this particular industry, and how Fallout 4 is pretty much, in the minds of most, is going to just be like steamroll everything. You know, Rise of the Tomb Raider, obviously an Xbox exclusive currently, and the likes of Battlefront and stuff. But I think for just the kind of the average kind of gamer who doesn't factor in that much, would probably, I think Star Wars would appeal far more. I know Fallout 4 has bridged that gap a good bit, but I think from being inside this echo chamber,
well, you've got a point there. I mean,
I think we're underestimating how big Battlefront could be with just the general masses. But I know Fallout's already transcended that, so both will do incredibly well.
Mm-hmm. Now you got me. Now you got me thinking. Now I don't know. Well, I do kind of know which one. You very convincingly just told me that. Okay, maybe give it 3 months time of sales. Star Wars will probably sell more.
Well, I think EA is hoping to hit 12 million or so. So, which I think they'll definitely bridge the 10 million gap. But
I mean, if you just see how stores are totally taken over by Star Wars merchandise,
it's
everywhere. It's ridiculous. I've never seen anything like this. I walk into a Best
Buy and there is Star Wars cardboard displays with miscellaneous merchandise that normally wouldn't be in a Best Buy.
And even like there's places like Kohl's and JC Penney's, and like
true.
They have like all of these huge sections.
It's so intense right now. You go to the grocery store and you walk down the cracker or cookie aisle or the cereal aisle, and there's Star Wars everywhere.
The cookie aisle, right, Ernest?
Oh.
No.
I was just there. I was just there
a
couple days ago.
This movie's going to be just absolutely ridiculous.
I mean, you'd think that Star Wars Battlefront is actually coming out before Fallout with the amount of attention it's been getting.
Yeah, but I respect Bethesda so much that we literally, less than, it's maybe 6 months before the release, we literally know nothing. Yeah. And we still don't know an awful lot. I know, of course, Kyle does, but the rest of us don't know an awful lot. And then here it is, a couple of trailers later, and the game that everybody's been waiting for 5-6 years is now here.
Right. I think it'll be interesting to see how that translates, because in terms of just like popularity and like Christmas sales, Star Wars is going to outsell Fallout in my opinion. Just for like the parents and the family members and all this stuff, and they see like Star Wars everywhere.
It wasn't the teen-rated game,
I was about to bring that up. Is like the teen versus mature rating.
Yeah, so it's going to be it's just kind of interesting now that I never would have. Originally, I never thought of saying that Battlefront would outsell Fallout.
But it makes a lot of sense the more you think about it.
Yeah, it seems totally.
It's absolutely going to outsell Fallout.
Like, who would have thought that Fallout would be like a sleeper hit to another game?
I don't think it's
just
a
weird
conclusion. It's just more so don't underestimate, the general populace who are in this Star Wars warp field right now of hype. Well, but then again, Fallout is an absolute juggernaut. It will. I couldn't call it, to be honest.
Fallout 4, it's got a lot longer lifespan in terms of sales. Like, Fallout 4 is just going to keep selling for years.
That's true. You've got the classic 2 to 3 year cycle fueled by Bethesda and the modding community, and the fact that it takes a while for some people to get around to it. And they go on deals. They get Game of the Year bundles.
Yeah, it's just gonna keep growing and growing. It may not be as big at the start, but it's gonna be. I can't imagine it's gonna be poorly received by anywhere. So it's gonna it'll just grow and get bigger. But
I mean, Star Wars is gonna be fine. They just are lucky that they aren't Rise of the Tomb Raider, which the Xbox One version launches on the same day as Fallout 4. That comes
out next week?
Yeah, that's terrible.
Dude, that's a little bit
Yep.
sad.
As
that
soon as
snuck
it was
up on me.
announced at E3 that was the release date, I just immediately was like, that thing's just not going to sell anything.
No,
That's a
It
little
was
bit
just
sad that it snuck
it's
up on me.
sending
Not
it to the.
because,
Oh.
yeah, not because
Sending
like,
it to the tomb. Oh, okay.
it's yeah, but that because like that game should it deserves to do well is what I'm saying.
Yes.
Like that
Oh,
that
Yes,
game
it looks great. Yeah.
Crystal
Yeah.
Dynamics is really talented, and I love the way they've turned Tomb Raider around. So it's sad not because it snuck up on me and I didn't realize it was coming, but it's sad because like it's sad that it's not going to sell what it could.
Mhm.
Right.
And that sucks.
But it fortunately it gets a second chance once it comes to PS4, I guess.
Yeah. Yep,
I thought
very
for
true.
sure it was going to get delayed. I thought they were going to have some kind of arbitrary reason for it being delayed so it wouldn't hit the same day.
It's
But
it's
I mean,
not
it would
too
have
late now.
It would have done
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
You've got to remember, if it was a week prior to what it was, could take away from like Halo's hype, and as well as Call of Duty and even Need for Speed to a lesser extent. And then if you go a week beyond Fallout, you're talking Battlefront, the juggernaut that is Battlefront. So they're kind of between a rock and a hard place.
yeah, that's true.
It's not as kind of clear cut as, oh, we could move it this and that, because there's circumstances that don't really permit that. It's unfortunate, but hopefully the game's quality shines through, I guess, and it sells based on that, not just because it unfortunately was nestled between these juggernaut releases.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough too, and you have to wonder how much foresight they had, because the original game came out in March of 2013, and I feel like it did really, really well because it wasn't surrounded by a lot of important titles. It was kind of, March at the time was a sweet spot. Every year seems to get more crowded, but I guess, and that's tough too because they probably had the Tomb Raider date set without knowing that was Fallout's date, and once these wheels are in motion, especially when the year's profits, your that would be Q4 for Microsoft. That's the hallmark, right? Like Halo 5 is out already, and now it's Tomb Raider. That you need that to come out, or else the financial year is a very different picture.
That's a good point.
Right, and they need to get it in, before Black Friday and all that jazz. So
Yeah, well, these are all these games that we know that are coming. There's another story that came out about a game that even the developers probably know very little about, and that was a story that's saying From Software is going to be releasing an exclusive PS4 JRPG someday in the future.
Baby.
Yeah, so
I'm looking
From
forward to that.
Software, the creators of first known for Demon Souls and Dark Souls.
Well, of course. Well, we had our
then
mech
Bloodborne.
fighting as well.
Yeah.
Want to go Armored Core style,
Yeah, but Bloodborne is their last biggest hit. Dark Souls 3 is we already know a lot about, so they're clearly not talking about that. They want something.
Yeah, there seems to
Very
be
different.
a kind of a discussion regarding like the semantics of JRPG, whether it means the general aesthetic that we associate JRPGs with, or the fact that it's just a role-playing game that is from Japan, so the likes of an action RPG like Bloodborne, or like
There's a quote that says that the next exclusive for PS4 currently in development is a Sony published first-party title like Bloodborne and is a JRPG.
Yeah, so then it's just a question of what
what
JRPG means.
Right, and this is important to point out before we go too far too. This is just known. This got found out by an industry insider named
grain of
Verendis.
salt.
So this is
for
somebody
sure.
who's usually, I guess, they're credited with being pretty reliable with their information, but still,
It's
wasn't
a
an
rumor.
official announcement. But
So here's what I hope comes out of this, and it's like the first thing that popped into my head when I read that phrase, From Software develops JRPG. I immediately thought of the Tales series for whatever reason, only because I think it's the JRPGs that, Zestiria just came out, and I played Exilia last year, so it was fresh in my mind. I'm like, okay, wait, it's not going to be cartoony because it's From Software.
Right.
So then I pictured a game with like a Tales or a Final Fantasy structure with like really realistic, kind of dark, gothic character design, like pseudo-realistic faces, gore, like a very, very adult aesthetic, a very adult color scheme and visuals, and I'm like, that sounds awesome. Like, take Final Fantasy or the Tales just structure of a classic linear JRPG, but put, like, really sophisticated graphics and more adult
gameplay.
themes on top of it. Yeah, and gameplay, better gameplay.
yeah,
And on on the flip side, it could easily be Bloodborne 2. We know that eventually
That's true.
will come out, and it could be literally just that the documents are signed. It's not even in pre-production or anything. It's just
Yeah.
it's at that very low level.
We do consider Bloodborne to be an RPG.
Yeah,
I think
an
most
action
people,
RPG as well. And as well, like even there was a quote a while ago. I can't remember who said it within Sony, but they were discussing going back to old IP and stuff, and just kind of exploring that, and to expect some things along that ilk. And knowing from Software's catalog, like
Demon Souls 2? I don't know.
no, imagine I think
Further back?
Oh yeah, further back. I think they did. Well, they've got Kingsfield and stuff, but that's a long time ago. But they do a version of Tenchu as well.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the game series. Like, yeah, that's the one that.
How sick would a brand new Tenchu be? By the way,
an action
out of nowhere.
RPG elements.
that would be awesome.
Man.
Nice, like hardcore From Software difficulty. That classic. You either stay stealthy or you die. I think that'd be sick. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, but you can't. Yeah, as well. You can't imagine that this is. I know they have two teams, but you can't imagine this is anywhere near pre-production, even at this stage. I'd say it's at the very start of the line.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what comes. But a different piece of technology that Sony really wants everybody to know everything about, but they seem to be having a little bit of trouble with, is PlayStation VR. And they just came out with a new tech trailer to hopefully show off some more of the specifics of why you should buy one or why it's as impressive as they claim it is.
So I'm curious what you guys think about the trailer, specifically the question, do you think the tech trailer was effective for that goal, like showing people why they should buy one?
I'm going to say no. Because I think what they did show was stuff anybody who is slightly, in the loop about PlayStation would know these things before, and I think they need, granted, as we said before, I know they didn't show anything at Paris Games Week in terms of release or price. We're expecting that at PSX, so what they're trying to do, they have to sell it to the PlayStation nation, as it were, the real diehards, and then they can pretty much, sell it to their friends and stuff. So they should show a trailer that kind of more shows the experience rather than the specs, because the specs are only pertinent probably to like PlayStation faithful.
Yeah, that
and we
was
already know that. So
yeah, that was my feeling too. Is that it was a little too spec heavy, and right after I watched it, I went, "Wait, this is like kind of a weird thing compared to what they showed at Paris Games Week." And I went back and searched for that trailer, and there is a Paris Games Week showcase trailer for PlayStation VR that's so much more game focused. It shows like 3 people using it, and then they're wearing the headset, and then the game is kind of behind them, translucent. It's moving as they move their heads. Like, it's just a really good visual demonstration of how it works. So then you line that up next to the tech trailer, which is like, yeah, it has a 1080p screen in each eye, and it has a 5.7-inch OLED. It's like, yeah, that's cool, I guess.
Right. Well, I think the purpose behind this trailer in particular was not to show off why you should, or what it can do. It's more to show what it is, and just basically say we have this sexy new piece of hardware that you all are just going to fawn over.
Yeah.
And they did in terms of that, they did a really good job on how they just displayed it, and it looks great.
Looks
I
nice.
mean, you see it, and it looks like this. It
like
looks like you see
different
people
angles,
that are right. But I mean, if you have anybody who's a tech head in any degree, and they see this thing, and they see, wow, this looks way sleeker and cooler than other VR headsets that they've seen, which is mainly at this point have all been prototypes, really. That have been big and blocky. So this is like the first time that you've seen like a really sleek, well-made trailer that shows that, and it has really high spec ratings for anybody who knows or is somewhat literate in any of those figures that they had. So I mean, they did a really good job with that, and they showed, like, answered some really pretty basic things that were concerns for people that were like, when you're looking at it through the eyes or looking at it with it on your head, people can watch what you're doing on the TV and stuff. Like, that's stuff that's been talked about in the past, but this like presented that really well in that kind of sense. So it wasn't more in terms of showing gamers why they should buy one. It just showed like this is a really awesome piece of hardware that you shouldn't miss out on.
Yeah, and perhaps it's too early to kind of go down that route to really try and show like, everybody why they should buy it. But
I
It's gonna be
mean,
interesting
I
to see
think
when
they
they
should.
start rolling it out like
They
that.
should have a. I think they should have a trailer that's focused on that coming out basically simultaneously with this one. But just that the
Yeah.
purpose of this one was not to
Yeah.
do that at
You've
all.
got to
more
imagine it's
more to inform, and
Right.
I mean, this is like a
Anticipation
sort of
for
trailer
PSX.
that you would only ever see them putting
Yeah.
on
I think, like,
streaming. It's not a TV commercial.
Yeah, no, this was good for people like us that have
Yeah.
experienced it and have gotten to see it, and I was like, wow, it can really do those things, or it's that, wow, I didn't realize it was that powerful, or if that was at that graphical level, or like things like that. But one of the things that they didn't mention that was in the trailer that was a story that came out too was that I didn't realize this was a question by anybody, but it has to be powered by an external source, or needs
I was
an
thinking
external
that
thing, so it's
because
like,
if they were trying to get games to run at 120 FPS on
Right.
PlayStation 4's hardware alone, I was questioning how that could be done for particular games that were graphic heavy.
Right.
But I'm glad though that it definitely has the extra processing power to, help with that.
That's an interesting
Yes.
point too. Is just about having to streamline those experiences in order to get them to run at 120. Because the game trailer I'm talking about, there were snippets of Until Dawn, Rush of Blood, the London Heist,
Yep.
Riggs, and the games look good for being like kind of Morpheus launch titles or PSVR launch titles. But then you look at something like the London Heist, and there's a scene there where you're kind of riding shotgun in a car and you're shooting out the window at a pursuer, and it's like, so many games on the market now are processing those actions, but then also things in the background. Like something like Fallout, you have this shootout going on in the street, like you and some AI enemies, but then there's a whole world simulated around you, right? Where there's at least, in something like Call of Duty, there's cars and helicopters moving that you can't even see because they're on the other side of buildings and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like what they're going to have to do, that's going to be a concession, and we won't necessarily see it as gamers because the whole point is that it's stuff that you wouldn't normally see anyway. But as developers, I think it's going to be a lot more streamlined because it has to be. So they'll probably have to make very careful decisions about what actually gets programmed and what actually gets shown to you, which could actually be good for, I wouldn't say the quality of games, but just there's always that rule in the arts, right, where sometimes it pays to be concise and boil things down back to the basics and kind of start over. And for game design, it could be the same way on PlayStation VR. It's like you have to suddenly not have so much fluff, so many accessory moments, so many vanity moments. So now we boil it down to the core gameplay.
Because that's going to be interesting because presumably given that level of power, that ceiling pretty much that PlayStation will have, it is going to be interesting to see if there's like a divergent path between developers who would be willing to like develop for PC and with Oculus and stuff where, you can update your process, you can update your CPU, your graphics card, everything kind of there's always, the ceiling's always rising. So it'll be interesting to see how that impinges on, gameplay and how development goes in response to that. Like, will you see cross-platform games, say, in 2-3 years where, it could be one experience for PlayStation given the hardware holding it back at that stage, or will it be like, will it be parallel to the PC experience? It's going to be interesting to see how the concessions are managed, going forward.
I think cross-platform would be almost, I would say, as out of the question. I would think, because
it will be.
Because I mean, so much of Morpheus PlayStation VR is the built-in move sensors and that kind of capability, not just like the gyroscopics and stuff. It's
that'll be an interesting
sensors.
struggle too, because I imagine that developers will want to do everything they can or everything within reason to make it cross-platform just for profitability reasons. But then if they do go that route, then PlayStation VR is going to be the limiting factor because it's on a console. There's a certain limit to the hardware you can do. So it's funny because it will I think it'll kind of mimic the way multi-platform games are now with PC, where most PCs that people own, you're not rendering games at a super higher fidelity than at consoles, but consoles are still the limiting variable there.
So this is an interesting kind of question that raises then. So do you think where things are currently at right now, whether or not PlayStation VR is a better piece of hardware, but do you think that Xbox and PCs are going to be those are going to be the VR, like the main VR gaming areas? Like the PlayStation's going to kind of fade off after a while, but those are.
I think so.
Go ahead, Ernest. You can chime in on this first. Think in the background.
Just because with again, I mean, we've discussed this before. With the PlayStation VR, you've got that install base with all the PS4 systems that are out in the homes. And then I assume, and I mean, we don't know yet for sure, but that Sony will price the VR headset lower than or comparable to Oculus.
Right, and that was actually that while we were talking about this, reminded me. One of you had mentioned before we started that there was that Shuhei Yoshida had commented on that PlayStation VR is going to be priced at a point where it's not intended to make a profit.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That it's going to be sold to. That's kind of like what we talked
It's gonna
about
be sold
last
at a
week.
loss.
So that kind of tells me that it's going to be on the lower end of the range that we were theorizing, which I think, what was our range? Like anywhere from
We had
250 to 400.
350,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe 300 is sounding a little more concrete. My response to the, where will the gaming experiences fall versus the consumer experiences? I think it's all going to depend on which one is easier to make things for, because with all the things that developers have to worry about now in VR, like as well as I will, the game we played at E3, Loading Human, right? That exploration kind of experience. They were telling us about what developers have to worry about now, which is biology, and which is what experiences trigger claustrophobia in people. Gone are the days when the only thing they had to worry about were epileptic seizures. So with all these new things to worry about, on top of making a game and making a game that's fun with this new input, I think the most attractive platform for games is going to be the one that's easiest. And in that respect, a console that has limits and there's a ceiling to how sophisticated your visuals can be, how sophisticated your tech can be, that might actually be attractive to developers, because it's just a smaller box in which you can see the boundaries, versus Oculus, where the computer hardware and just the infinite variation that a consumer could have for their computer complicates that picture so much. So if anything, I think 5 years out or 10 years out, PlayStation might dominate that gaming space, where Oculus goes into medicine and construction and all these consumer.
Yeah, well, I think it's a good thing good comparison is with Windows and Mac right now.
Right.
PlayStation VR is kind of the Apple version of VR in that kind of right, where that's going to be specialized and that's going to have it's kind of like
it's a closed system
purpose. That
has the stability.
Right, but Oculus is going to be on the whole thing about the install base. Oculus is going to be able to be plugged into any Windows device, correct? Or any any kind of computer.
There's still minimum requirements.
Sure, but I mean that's going to be a huge. That's got a huge install base compared to PlayStation VR, where PlayStation VR is going to have. I think we all agreed that's going to have a more specialized focus and easier promotion angle to run with than saying it can do everything.
Right in line with your comparison, Will, between Mac and Windows, it also looks to me like the difference between iOS and Android. Like iOS games, I was just reading a nice opinion piece about this on Polygon earlier today. iOS games almost always come out 6 months earlier or something to that effect on iOS, and then come out much later on Android, because there are hundreds of Android devices that Google needs to test your game on. So they just come out on iOS first, because there's only 4 devices that it needs to work on during the QA phase. So developers always pushed out to iOS first, and then the iOS users kind of become, in a way, the bug testers for the Android version that comes 6 months later. But still, it's the same thing, right? The Android space,
it's fragmentation.
Most people would agree that it's better for flexibility of your programs and what you want. You can turn your Android into a PS1 emulator, you know what I mean? Or you can turn it into this an operating system that looks nothing like when it looked when you bought it. But the consequence of that is that, and the same with Oculus, the variability there and just this infinite space of technology means it's just going to be so much easier to make games for PlayStation VR.
Things to be a lot more reliable on there, but you actually set up a perfect segue point off of that into another big story that came out. Speaking of games on phones, Activision Blizzard just bought King Games for $5.9 billion. So,
yum.
What do we think that means for the game industry as a whole? That'll be interesting to. I mean, that has a lot of different ways we can go off on it, but so Ernest said disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, to put in perspective, Facebook bought Instagram for $1 billion. Oculus was $2 billion. Minecraft was 2.5 billion. Marvel and Star Wars each were 4 billion. And then
Together?
no,
were they 4
each.
billion? Oh, each
Each
separately?
by
Okay.
itself was 4 billion for each of them. And then
Can you imagine
five
those?
point almost 6 billion
Right,
for
th-
Candy
those
Crush,
stupid
which is
little
on
games.
its
Yeah.
which is, not growing. It's kind
No.
of past its peak.
Well, there've been a billion spin-offs of it.
Oh, it's
So it's
insane
like-
how many.
Even the
Saga
company
games.
itself has made spin-offs of its game.
Yes. Oh, there's so
Like,
many. And they're all the same game. They are all the same game, basically.
I'm actually
Just-
looking at their homepage right now, and everything ends in Saga. and
Yes, it's disgusting.
Yep.
I'm actually there's about 8 on the homepage, all that end in Saga, and they all look pretty much the exact same. It's incredible, to be honest. I don't think it's going to have any far-reaching consequences because I think they still make an incredible profit daily. So it's just a matter of consolidating that revenue stream and just hoping that nothing too drastic changes in the future.
I like the last game on the site, Scrubby Dubby Saga.
Scrubby Dubby Saga.
So,
10 out of 10.
do you guys think that they're gonna basically let just King Games keep doing what they're doing, or do you think they're gonna have more of a hand in what happens from now on? Like, because Blizzard and Activision is, from what I know of, they do have some hands in the
Right.
phone game pot, but like Blizzard has done Hearthstone and stuff has come out
I mean,
to
yeah, that's
mobile
what makes
devices and that
sense.
kind of stuff, and that's huge on its own. So
A
That's
lot
what
of what I've
go
seen
ahead.
with Activision is that when they acquire a studio, they do, sort of impose some demands on them
Sure,
and
which you'd expect.
assign projects and such. So I mean, possibly they are doing this so they could, really get into that mobile game market. Maybe have them do, I don't know, like a Skylanders mobile game spinoff. Something.
I mean,
God,
they
they'd
could
sell
do
a
it
lot.
for any property. They could do it for
right, for
they
all
could do
their
a
IPs.
Hearthstone spin-off or like a Warcraft spin-off, a Call of Duty spin-off. So I think there's value in that way, but there's also value in like, and this is all right. So this is, I mean, obviously I can't speak to like how much money this actually means to Activision, because when you're operating at that level of spend and at that level of corporate structure, you're just in a completely different world than the rest of us.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So we have I can't even internalize that amount of money. I can't imagine it. So, but looking past that, like, I have to imagine it's really expensive and possibly like long-term costly to somebody like Activision to try to make their own way into the mobile gaming market. Like, let's set a team aside, let's try to learn it from scratch, let's try to find that secret sauce that's worked for other people, because there's R&D costs that go into that. You're paying salaries for a couple of years and maybe nothing comes of it, and all of that was a waste. So by dropping $6 billion on King, which is an insane amount of money, again, it is kind of like a magic ticket to the top of all of the charts. And so King has presumably maybe even 100 million active users that are proven to spend money on mobile games because they spend money on these shortcuts and these extra credits and what have you.
Mhm.
So it's like, if you have this built-in user base, these people who know the Saga games, and you have all this demographic data on who actually spends money on mobile apps, like, is it ages 25 to 34, is it men versus women, whatever. Yeah, it's almost like Activision paid $6 billion for like the secret
Data mining.
like literally, yeah, like data, like in a way,
Right.
yeah, kind of video game data mining. And now, like, it's just the $6 billion ticket to be like, whatever we make next, we know it's going to be an insane runaway success that could push a couple $1 million a week just in microtransactions, because we just know what the formula is, or King knows what the formula is.
Yeah.
But then the alternative look is that in this space of social or mobile games, is that it's been really hard to replicate runaway
true.
success, and that I don't think there has been a really good example of a company coming out with two ginormous hits back to
And
back,
that's-
or even in their lifespan. The sort
Yeah.
of philosophy with that industry is make a huge hit and just cash out for as much.
Right,
as
and that's something
as
that
you
I've
can.
been seeing this story was what just made me think, just kind of like, why would you do? I don't see them getting their, like, clearly, like we said, we're not on the same level as they are knowing how this works. But
so numbers,
like, I don't see how that they are going to make their money back off of this, because clearly they've ran out of ideas a long time ago.
So
when you're looking through their games list.
So 2014's revenue for King Games was only $2.26 billion, which is still a lot of money.
It's a lot, but I mean, in terms of the long term, getting your money, like, I feel like, is it, like, I guess to have it as a simple, poignant question is like, did they do this? Did they jump on this too late? Like, is this not worth their investment?
It's too late. What if it was just like a sign of kind of power and wealth, just to show that they could do it, and maybe to please investors? I don't know.
It'd be like the sad flailings of a dying old man refusing to give up on life.
Just, hey, okay, you guys said we should get really into mobile games. We just bought Candy Crush, which I'm sure some of you investors have played, so there you go.
Right, because I mean, like, their portfolio clearly doesn't show a capability in, like, variety, or like in just range of ability in creating games. It's all the same. So I mean, like, they haven't needed it and they don't need it, but for a company like Activision Blizzard to buy it, it's just like, it seems just really.
It's
kind
interesting,
of odd.
because it could be too late. I think you could be onto something, Will. There's probably like maybe a 50-50 chance it could go either way, because King's revenue is up, I believe, year over year from 2013 to 2014, which kind of flies in the face of, I think Zynga is kind of the famous example of a company that went big on mobile gaming and then kind of just self-imploded. But I mean, Activision, and I'm totally just stealing this from Wikipedia right now, they only have about 14 billion in total assets. So that, their lines of credit, the things owed to them, all the investments, all the things that includes. Yeah, that's not. I mean,
they spent well over a third of their budget.
Yeah,
like that's for their money, their whole company.
Right, exactly. So I mean, the other part of it too is that maybe Activision is saying, we're spending 40% of our total assets to make this happen, but Destiny is a runaway success, and Destiny 2 could make even more money than the first. So we're set, on that side of our revenue.
I mean, if King has a lot of dormant abilities that just haven't shown off yet, and they made like a really good companion app for Destiny in the mobile space, that could be huge.
Right. I mean, we gotta think about it. They're not necessarily buying King Games' current properties. It's the potential and it's the talent that they have.
But it's just like what they've shown doesn't show a lot of variation from idea. So that, I mean, that's just
right. It is a concern, and it's going to be it's going to be really interesting to see what Activision's sort of grand plan for all of this is going to play out.
It's kind of crazy to step back. This is one of those things that I wouldn't say it really snuck up on me how big Activision has gotten, but if you sit back and look at it, they own Diablo, they own Heroes of the Storm, they own everything Blizzard does, Warcraft, everything else, everything that's coming, World of Warcraft 2, presumably in the next 5 years. They own Call of Duty, they own Destiny, they own King Games now. Like, it's kind of insane. You always always know they're a juggernaut, like that's obvious, that's just taken for granted. Then you step back and go, holy shit, they really are a juggernaut.
Yeah, I mean, like, whenever I hear Activision now, I always feel like part of it is because they don't have the same kind of like media presence as the other major, either like third-party studios and stuff at like events like E3 and that kind of stuff. So it feels like they're just kind of like, they're there, like they're a big name, but they're kind of dying. You just kind of, that's what I think, like in the back of my head. But it's like, like you're right, they're not even close.
That's true. They do have BlizzCon.
Right, they have BlizzCon.
Well, they bought BlizzCon.
Right.
I mean, looking at their stock, I mean, people reacted well to the announcement. It's up.
Yeah.
Looking at the 5-day graph here, so
that'll be interesting.
I guess the investors kind of approve of it.
I mean, man, if you can bridge the divide between console and PC gaming, like IPs like Destiny and Heroes of the Storm and Warcraft, if you can and use that with King's competency, well, more than that, in the mobile space and the fan base they've garnered and the name, the push power they have as just a name, and how incredibly advertised, they're everywhere. If they can bridge that divide by creating as you said, spin-offs of IP. You're going to see this probably cross-pollination where there's this symbiotic relationship between mobile gaming booming, and then you'll have the likes of Destiny if there's a companion app on mobile. You'll have this cross-pollination, and it could be huge, like absolutely huge, just really bridging that divide, because of course console gamers and stuff and PC gamers will look down on mobile, and rightfully so for many reasons, but if that divide can be, if it could be brought in a bit more, then there's definitely potential there. It's an incredible amount of money to put in, but I can see the idea behind it. It's just, that's just one piece of the puzzle. The rest is a very careful line of steps that will have to go absolutely perfect for them to pull off, successful.
And clearly there was a lot of conversation that went in on this, because you don't just spend $5.9 billion on something. So
you should see me on a Friday night.
All right.
But I think Adam's point is a good possibility. It could be the same sort of strategy that we've heard Nintendo reiterate about their mobile games, in that they are going to have these mobile apps and games there not to replace their core games business, but there to support it and introduce people to their properties and characters and get them to switch over, and also buy their system and games.
Just the figures of people who even passively play mobile games is outstanding. I don't have the figures on hand, but that alone shows the potential if everything lines up properly, and it's going to be interesting times, definitely.
Yeah, it'll be. Only time will tell, I'd say, for this, but definitely a surprising move on their part so far. But we got a lot of other big topics to go, so we think we need to move on from King Games for now,
and breathe.
Yeah. So next big story. Not exactly surprising, I think, for a number of people, but it still was impressive to see that Witcher 3 pretty much swept the Golden Joystick Awards in a lot of big categories. So and it even won its Game of the Year.
Yeah, definitely nice to see. I still have to pick it up.
I haven't gotten to play it either, but I know Kyle's the big advocate. I don't know, Ernest, did you get a chance to play it?
I didn't get a chance to play it. I watched my roommate play it.
Okay, so before we let Kyle go off on why it deserved its awards, we'll give the rest of the awards that it got. It got Best Storytelling, Best Visual Design, and Best Gaming Moment, which was apparently the Bloody Baron quest.
Interesting.
So, but then, and then it got Game of the Year, so those are the major spots it got. Bloodborne got Best Original Game, and
well deserved.
There was another thing on it. Oh, there. Best PlayStation Game. Interesting.
Funny that Witcher 3 wins all the others, but Bloodborne gets Best PlayStation Game. I know why, because it's exclusive of everything else, but it's one of those classic things, where the awards like, wait a minute. Yeah, all that makes sense for The Witcher. The best gaming moment, that's kind of weird to me. Like, I'd be curious to know some of the rationale behind that, because I obviously know the quests they're talking about, and it's like, yeah, that was a good story, good RPG quest, but I feel like those are kind of a dime a dozen in a game like The Witcher 3. It feels like every side quest has that kind of gravity and that kind of a twist like that. So yeah, that's an interesting one. But the game's phenomenal. I reviewed it for PSU. I gave it a 9.5. And I legitimately said, without hyperbole, and I still stand by it, it is one of the definitive RPGs of our time. Like, it's one of those once in a generation games, or once in a 2-generation kind of game. And it was just powerful. Like, it reminded me of playing Morrowind for the first time. And maybe that's a weird comparison, because the games don't actually have very much in common, except for maybe some of the open world aspects. But
hopefully it plays better than Morrowind.
Fair enough. But it was just the craft that went into it, right? Sure. It's the biggest game world to date by leaps and bounds, and yet every inch of it is just packed with handcrafted terrain, interesting people, interesting things to do and see. Like, there's not a pixel of that world that wasn't put there for a reason. And that manifests itself into, like, what I think is going to be a timeless game.
All right, and what's even more impressive, too, is that it's not... The studio that developed it does not meet the size of the vast majority of other kind of, like, giant studios that are out there, giant game names, anyway.
Yeah, and if, that just, I think ahead to the future, and I think about what that studio is doing now. They're making Cyberpunk 2077, so think The Witcher 3, except in, cyberpunk science fiction.
An even bigger world is what they said too, right?
Oh, that's just crazy.
That's insane.
I don't even
huge metropolis that you can just lose yourself in.
Wouldn't that be cool
Huh.
though if they did develop just not only is it a huge metropolis, but it's like a metropolis to scale. Like, 'cause
Yeah.
video games always fall short of that, but this is a metropolis where
That's what I always hated when
Million
people
people-
say like this is based off of New York or Chicago, and it's like no,
Like
it's
Like the
not.
GTA
It's like-
games.
Yeah. Well, it's
It
even
could
like
tie
the
into the
Watch
release
Dogs,
of-
and like I thought there's like this is based off Chicago. It's like that's like just a block of Chicago is what you developed there. It's like
yeah, exactly.
it's just like that's not even close.
Hopefully,
Yeah,
it
that's-
ties in with the release of Blade Runner 2 and actually becomes a Blade Runner game. Now, that's what we want.
They'll probably come pretty close to each other in release date
It's kind of like that.
within a
What
year.
was- What's the game that became Halloween just recently? I can't remember. It was a Kickstarter for a game, and then they revealed around.
Oh, Friday.
Oh,
Is that
Oh.
Friday the 13th? Is that what you're talking?
Sorry, Friday the 13th, not Halloween. Yeah.
yeah.
I would love if CD Projekt Red did that with Blade Runner. My God.
Blade Runner. Yeah. So yeah, no, The Witcher 3, like I said, it's timeless. Like, I can't say that enough, and I try to keep my praise under consideration, try to take away any of like the fact that I subjectively I like RPGs. That's probably my favorite genre, but still,
Right.
it's phenomenal.
Like I mean, clearly you're not alone because it won Game of the Year for Golden Joystick.
Yeah, that's an
so, I
interesting
mean,
one too, because if you, I'm not sure that it would have had we waited and like the Golden Joysticks just happened to take place like end of December, or early January, and then they
Sure.
look back at the previous year. And I'm not saying necessarily that Fallout 4 is better than The Witcher 3. I wouldn't. I don't know where to render that judgment either way right now, but well, I think it would be interesting because you might have seen like Fallout 4 sweep best story, and you might have seen Star Wars sweep best gaming moment with like Hoth or Endor or something.
Sure. Well, Fallout 4 did get Most Wanted game.
Yeah, Bethesda's marketing around this has, in the last week specifically, has been really, really interesting because there's these conversations now going on around Fallout with all these things leaking, and like some of it's negative conversation. Like there are jaded people on forums like NeoGAF and other places who maybe rightfully, maybe not rightfully point out the graphics don't look very good. It doesn't look like a next gen game or this, that, the other. And so
Oh,
Bethesda has like released a blog post describing in extreme detail all the new graphics technology, and now they got the launch trailer coming out. So if anyone's, and maybe a mainstream audience is never going to notice this or know it, but there's an interesting kind of tug of war, I think, here with like Bethesda really hitting the marketing hard to kind of combat the leaks and try to keep that conversation to a dull or a lull.
Right. So we've kind of first let's comment on the trailer for everybody watched it.
Yeah.
So just kind of say that first before we continue in the kind of the real meat of the conversation that we're going to have. Adam, you haven't really gone deep into the Fallout games before. So
No, I haven't.
but this is a game that you've said that you're pretty interested in, to say the
Oh,
least, I would
certainly.
say. And that so what did you think of the Fallout 4 trailer now that just came out for this? Built off of kind of like the other ones that have come out before this.
I mean, it's continued that hype train kind of chugging along pretty nicely. I mean, I don't think I need to see really any more. I kind of think the trailer was nice to kind of get a bit more context and stuff, because Fallout can kind of seem like this insurmountable giant, where you're crafting your own kind of narrative, and you're going off on these side quests and stuff. So it's kind of nice to be kind of a bit more focused in like a launch trailer. But even just to touch upon the graphics that Kyle was talking about, it's not something that I, as somebody from the outside who hasn't got any experience with the series, would really care too much about. I mean, the
Right.
game, from my point of view, from like, obviously it's a huge world, and everything seems to be, you can interact with literally everything, and everything is a consequence of each other. Things could be, it's not just big for big's sake. There's method to all of it, and everything is malleable and can change and stuff. And with that, there's always going to be concessions to some sort of graphical sheen,
Sure.
which
Um,
doesn't bother me as long as it looks better than Fallout 3
Right.
in New
It's
Vegas,
like
which
it's
it does.
leaps and bounds above the previous Fallout games. So I mean, people that
Absolutely.
are criticizing it don't understand the history of that studio very well, I would
Yeah,
think.
and just
So-
again, how interactive and malleable the experience is. I'm surprised that there is a bit of a decry over the graphics. I think this is, to be honest, at least what I expected. Maybe for more, hardline fans of the series, they expected a bit more, but from somebody who just appreciates what type of game Fallout is and the hysteria around it, I'm not too surprised with how it looks. And I'm happy with how it looks as well.
Yeah, like I can't imagine how what kind of horsepower you would need for a game that would have that level of interactivity that Fallout has with like Bloodborne style graphics or like level of graphics. Like I can't imagine how that game would even run.
Well, I didn't. Yeah, and I didn't
like,
mean to
there's
set,
the hint.
I didn't
Yeah,
mean
so it's
to set the tone of the conversation on the graphics right away because I think the whole thing is really overblown, like the way people have been talking about it. But I do think maybe we should rewind a little bit and just kind of mention, because it's the kind of meta around our podcast. This is released to you, the listener who's listening to this, on Monday, November 9th, and the Fallout 4 review embargo has passed. So we're actually recording this on Thursday, the 5th. But we can talk about the game because at the point that you're listening to it, it's okay. It's out in the wild now, and you've probably read a bunch of reviews, including our own, which is courtesy of Neil Bolt. He's working on that very hard right now. But yeah, that's kind of where all of our impressions are coming from.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. So, well, I'll just go back to the trailer quick first. Just for me, I've been a huge fan of Fallout for a while. Like I played a lot of Fallout 3 and New Vegas specifically, and going through those, and just interesting things that I've seen in here. There's one part where like there's a bit heavy emphasis in the trailer. Kyle knows more about this because spoilers, he actually has been playing it.
I've also been playing it, yes.
So, but before, maybe you'd be able to answer some of these kind of things that are going on in the trailer that I've seen so far. But in the trailer that came out, there's a big focus on synths. They say synths, CYTH.
SY, yeah, like synthetics,
yeah. So they were just like synthetic, like people or like robots, and there's a big thing about like uprising against them or being afraid of them, and like that was something that's a really interesting view that it's not been even hinted at in previous Fallout games from what I recall or anything. So it's a totally new kind of direction in that, and that's a really interesting thing. And part of that could just be regionally specific in terms of the game world. So it'd be interesting to know how much of that is focused because of like the reasoning for why these things exist in this area and why it's an issue and how advanced they are and that kind of stuff. But another thing that was interesting to see really quickly is that they've said before is that there's encampments or little kind of trade towns or things that you can build yourself and manage in that way. And it looks like you also can have to defend them from attackers, I think is right. From what I saw in some of the part in the trailer, there's a section where there were people attacking this kind of building, and then somebody was defending it from up above. But it looked like there were normal like raiders, and then there was also like a super mutant with them attacking in unison. So like teaming up and fighting. I was like, that's a really cool aspect to it. That's not. It's always been like super mutants are separate from raiders, which are separate from ghouls, which are separate from the feral ghouls, which are separate from like the vault people. So it's interesting to see them kind of blending together in this way. So, but yeah, I don't know. Ernest, haven't had much to say so far. I don't know. I don't want to leave you out before we move on, but
it's all good.
Yeah.
I mean, the game looks fun.
Yeah.
I don't have a ton of experience with Fallout. I've played some of Fallout 3. That was cool, but just for me personally, not my kind of game.
Sure. So
yeah.
So Kyle, what was so since you've gotten to play this game, hopefully you can answer some of my questions that I've posed and probably have when we talk. But did you have a lot of experience with Fallout before this?
I wouldn't go as far as to say a lot. I probably put maybe 20 hours into Fallout 3 over different incarnations. I played a bit on PS3. I played a bit on PC later. But just a few different playthroughs that I got a little ways into.
Sure.
A little bit of New Vegas, but yeah, mostly with Fallout 3 I played probably 20 hours total across different platforms.
Okay, so what would you say, having that experience with 3 and then now being able to play 3 in New Vegas and now playing 4, what would you say is the most striking thing about 4 going off of that in terms of just like differences or how they've improved it?
All right, I have two things two striking things that I don't know that I can really pick between, because it really depends on what really matters to you as the player, because it's two cool new things. I will say this, like if somebody listening to the podcast wants to be completely, I'm not going to spoil anything about the story. I'm not going to talk in great detail about anything that you don't ask me to. I'm happy to answer questions, obviously. But if somebody wants to go into Fallout literally knowing nothing about it, they should probably call it quits here, right? Because we'll probably be talking about it for the rest of, or until we get to our new game releases at the tail end of the podcast. But fair warning, we're going to talk about Fallout. So the two most striking things, the two most awesome things, the first is settlements. And we saw, that was kind of one of the big elements of the E3 reveal. We saw that you could build your own settlements. You have people living there. You set up defenses, guard posts. You construct, walls, and you've got workshops where you can take materials from the world and build weapons and turrets and all this stuff. But I didn't realize how deep that system was going to be, and I don't think anybody's really prepared for how deep it's going to be, because it is amazing. It is so cool. And to the point where my first day of playing Fallout, which was over, what would it be, I guess 2 weekends prior to the people listening to this, I spent my entire Saturday building my settlement. Like 8 hours of gameplay. I built it the moment the feature was introduced to me, which is actually very, very early in the game. They open the reins and say, run with it if you want to. You don't have to play through the story to get to it, is what I'm saying. It's like right there. But yeah, the moment I started to realize how deep that is, and I mean, we're literally talking to the point where you can design a settlement down to the shape of your walls, and I want to build a staircase here because I'm going to put a sitting lounge up on this rooftop, and I'm going to put a generator here because I want 3 turrets guarding my crops, or I want not 1 weapon bench but 2 weapon benches, and I want this exact person to stand at this guard post when it comes under attack. So you can assign the roles and stuff. It's way deeper than I expected. It's really, really addicting, and it taps into a creative side of me that I didn't really even know I had with video games. Traditionally, I'm not a big fan of creation modes and things like Little Big Planet. Right. Going all the way back to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, or you would make your own skate parks. That was my first taste of it, and I was never very good at it, never very great with the tools. But this makes me feel like I am the governor of my own, God, what is the town from Walking Dead? Is it Woodbury?
I have no idea.
Okay. Anybody know what I'm on with here? Okay. Anyway,
but basically, you have a little Sims game, almost kind of like
exactly,
SimCity game built within this.
And it's to the point, it's to the point where you are literally placing and rotating any one of, I would guess, the total number of objects you can place down is probably close to 100. If you add up all the different walls, crop types.
Sure.
Defense posts, towers, staircases, things like that. There's probably about 100 things you can place. You can rotate, raise elevation, connect things together, and if they're of similar type, they'll snap together easily for you, and kind of, you can get going, and you can build a nice-looking settlement really, really quickly, even in the first-person mode of just walking around and placing those objects, because that is how you do it. You kind of press the touchpad, and it goes into creation mode. Yeah, so it's not an over-the-top view. You're literally running around, and this wall section is just kind of floating in front of you like a translucent object, and then you press X to confirm, put it here. So that's the format.
Yeah, because I was totally envisioning that as a top-down type.
Yeah,
of
like a top-down.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, you're literally you're in the world. I want to pick up this fridge, rotate it, and bring it over here to the bedroom area that I'm setting up for my settlements. And yeah, that's it not only is it addictive in the sense that it's really easy to build the settlements, but you totally feel like you're again, like I say from The Walking Dead, you're the governor of your own camp of survivors. You're their leader in the sense that you need to make sure you have enough beds to accommodate all of them, or else your happiness level will drop. Food and water, you want enough to accommodate the number of people that are there, but the more food and water you have, the more likely you are to come under attack, in which case you want to keep your defense rating high enough to match up with your food and water. You want to build basically, it's loose. If you build crops, you want to build some turrets to accommodate them.
It sounds like when they made Fallout Shelter, it was directly inspired by this.
It's
part
interesting.
Of their game.
Yeah, it is kind of like a little, not a tease, but kind of like a foreshadowing a little bit. I think if you look at Fallout Shelter, it's clear that Bethesda was really intrigued by the idea of micromanaging a settlement, and now in Fallout
Right.
4, it's like the full scale three-dimensional version of that. And what's even more impressive about that is, I mean, you can't build a settlement everywhere in the world, but there's
Okay.
like,
That was going to be one of my questions. Yeah.
there are distinct zones that you can take over and build a settlement there if you choose to. Like, even when they introduce the feature to you, other than like, rudimentary, hey, plant a crop here to complete your quest, you don't have to delve into it if you don't want to, and you're not penalized like, the FOBs from Metal Gear Solid. It's not that
Sure.
involved.
So
But
how do you populate your base then? Do people just show up, or do you
they
have to
do,
network it with other places, or?
right. So that's it's somewhat speculation. I mean, I do know that you start off like your first settlement has, I think, 4 or 5 people in it. A couple of them have names, like they're kind of minor story characters, and then more settlers will come to your settlement if I think it's a loose function of how much resources you've built. Like if you're investing in food and water, like I'm going to drop some water wells here. I'm going to put a water purifier over in the river to really ramp up the amount of water I'm producing, build some crops. I think that does accelerate the number of settlers the game will kind of send to your camp. Because basically what happened is I just spent, my entire Saturday building a really badass settlement exactly the way I wanted it. And then I came back to the settlement after doing quests on Sunday, and I had like 3 or 4 more people there who had just kind of shown up, and were already doing work. They were already kind of, involved and walking around. And it's cool because it's like you take that idea of micromanaging like a small town, and then bring the camera all the way down to first person, and you're like moving around it and like kind of in there with your people, and it's just it's so much of an investment there. And I think what you're talking about with the trailer, with the super mutants and the raiders, is that you can randomly come under attack at any time, and that's just something you have to be ready for. You have to kind of, it would probably behoove you to give your people a somewhat decent weapon, nothing fancy, but maybe like an automatic rifle instead of a shitty pistol, so that they can actually have a chance of defending themselves when raiders come. And of course, your turrets and stuff are supposed to take care of that for the most part. In a perfect world, it would, but it's just so much. So we just launched the whole settlement thing. That's
Right.
one really striking piece, and I think it's going to take a lot of people by surprise. And it's like, oh my god, like this is something that we only could do in mods before, like Oblivion mods, Skyrim mods, where you're setting up your own home. And Bethesda has totally co-opted that and made it part of the game. And I think you can build them in maybe 8 places, 10 places in the world. Like there's a good amount of places you can
Okay.
set up camp.
So I'm assuming, since they're the specialized zones, that you can fast travel between them as if they were real settlements.
Yeah, absolutely.
in the
And then
game
if you build up a few of them, and I haven't, because like it's enough of a drain on my resources just kind of building new things for my one settlement that I've really blown the lid off of. But if you build up a few different of your settlements, you can set up supply lines between them. So I think, and
Okay.
this is not something that I've experienced yet, so I'm not sure how it works, but I think you can kind of share resources. Like if you have one settlement that has like a surplus of food and water or aluminum or some other material, it can help buffer the others. And similarly, if your charisma rating is high enough, you can get a perk called local leader, and you can put trading posts in your settlement. Like you can have a vendor who will sell you weapons, who will sell you items right there at your camp.
Cool.
So it
Nice.
goes on and on. There's so much, and there's plenty of it that I haven't even experienced yet. But that's huge. So that's one thing. The second striking thing is on a much smaller scale, and it's totally the opposite end of like this big mechanical change to the game, and that's that the game has a lot of personal, surprising touches to it. And I guess what I mean by that is, if you think about Skyrim or Fallout 3 as you're playing those games, you have these huge epic worlds, but if you spend enough time in them, it's like the seams of the game start to show themselves a little bit. Like you can see that, there are
Right.
only so many ways that a character can speak to you. There are only so many voice lines that have been recorded, so you hear the same lines repeating. So just like the seams start to show a bit. But I'll take one example, right? So you can have companions in Fallout 4, kind of similar to in Skyrim. You could have people follow you around, but they've expanded the system a great deal. So you have these companions. I'll just use the example of a girl. I'll call her Catherine, right? You meet Catherine through a side quest, and she volunteers to be your companion. You can have her come with you into combat, and a relationship can actually develop. Like, as you perform actions that Catherine likes, you might see the notice, similar to like a Telltale game. Catherine liked that, you know? Like,
Right.
Catherine
I
liked
remember them talking about that briefly in the past before.
Yeah. But then, so on top of that, you've got like the things that we've seen in like Mass Effect or Telltale games where a relationship is actually developing with your companion, but then their personalities really shine in dialogue, and that's what I mean about this personal or this intimate kind of aspect of the game. Like, I am adventuring with Catherine, we're exploring this bombed out school, and I'm picking up what Fallout calls pre-war money, you know, not bottle caps, but like old cash left over from a previous life that you're just supposed to sell.
Which, if you ever come across it, and well, in 3 anyway, in New Vegas, I know it doesn't weigh anything, so if you ever come across it, always pick it up, and then you can sell it for a lot of money.
Yeah, totally. So I'm picking it up, and then as I'm picking it up out of a drawer, she's like, this is literally as close as I can remember what she says. I don't know why you're always collecting all those relics, and they're not worth anything anymore. Like, she remarks on the fact that I picked up this old pre-war item, and she's like, I can't stand that nostalgic crap. Like, so, like, not only is she commenting on the action that I'm taking, but then she's commenting on the specific object that I'm picking up. And then, you know, later, I think it was either I, like, brutally, you know, shot some guy's head off in VATS mode, or I did some other action that triggered a totally different response. And it was like, maybe I picked up, like, a hot plate, you know, like an old kitchen accessory. And she's like, why bother? We're not going to get anything for that. Remarking on the fact that it's not worth very much. And I was just picking up for the parts that I could break it down into. But yeah, so those personal touches combined with like the relationship development. Like, she stopped me in the middle of a quest once as we were just walking along and went, hey, can I talk to you for a second? I just heard that voice behind me, and I'm like, what? I like turn around, and she's just standing there waiting for me to talk to her. So I hit X to talk to her, and there's a new dialogue option there that says, you wanted to talk to me? And so that's what I said, and this whole conversation played out, and it was like a personal moment where she kind of shared her feelings about how our adventures had been going so far. And at any moment, even outside that conversation, you can stop and ask your companion how they're feeling right now, how they're feeling about you, about just the status of your adventure. Do they think you're despicable? Do they really like you? So it's, the companion thing is really, really deep, and I think they took a lot of their cues from mods and how the companion part, I think, in Skyrim's later years started to become popular.
Right.
But yeah, it really adds a personal
the
touch.
The companion thing in
affecting stuff.
3 and New Vegas is always really one of the best parts of it. Fox was always the best companion out of all of them.
Yeah, so it was great to, right, it was great to always have those guys with you, but then there was only so much they could do, right? There was only, like, that
right,
level,
but they were just more accessory, not actually like real part of the your experience of the game. That's pretty cool.
Like, she's a better locksmith or a lockpicker than I am, so you can command her and I'll be like, yeah, pick that lock for me, because I can't. I don't have to do that. And that's just a particular skill that she has. And I've met maybe 4 or 5 different companions I've come across in the world. She's the only one other than Dogmeat, he's one of the companions. She's the one I've taken with me for a significant stretch of time. So yeah, I mean, I assume that they all have different skill sets. Like, one dude could be a really accurate sniper, etc. So
that's cool. Well, you did you touched on VATS really quickly when you were talking about that. So what, I know that they kind of redid they had a totally different group of people working on the shooting mechanics of the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'm assuming, from what I know, I'm assuming that Bethesda did the VATS themselves, like they did that whole system internally, but that's pretty much the same from what they've shown.
Exactly.
But how does the just kind of regular shooting feel in comparison to like the older ones? Because it was like impossible to do anything.
Oh yeah, it was the worst
in the old games.
In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you have to click R3 to zoom in or go ADS on your guns instead of using the left trigger? I seem to remember
something
that.
Yeah, it could be.
Could just aim. Yeah, it's a lot better. Like, it's manageable, but it's also.
Is VATS still encouraged more when you're shooting?
Yeah. So that's the thing about it. Like, it's a lot better, and there are definitely times when when your VATS is recharging, when your AP is recharging, you can totally shoot like a first-person shooter and be decent at it. Like, it's just awkward enough that VATS is what you want to do at close range, but at long range, like, genuinely, you'll probably have a better chance of pulling off a headshot than you would in VATS, just by aiming like you're used to. And then at closer range or close to medium range, you definitely want to use VATS because it's not quite there where it's a native first person shooter. It's like just awkward enough that VATS is still a desirable thing,
Right.
but totally competent at like medium to long range shooting.
Nice. So, how big of a role does karma play in 4 versus
Yeah.
because that was a game changing factor in the previous ones. So that's
Yeah.
something that I haven't heard them really talk about, but I'm assuming it's has a pretty prominent role.
I would assume so too, but I unfortunately can't speak to that very much because I haven't really gotten steeped in
Right.
any major factions. Like I think I've discovered what a couple of the factions are, and
But
maybe
have you seen options in your playing so far that can allude to that more
um,
deeply, or have you not really just had that much opportunity?
yeah, I think it's just a lack of opportunity. There are definitely dialogue choices that have been, kind of like, at least on a personal level, like you're either a jackass or a
Right,
or a yes
okay.
man.
Yeah.
But yeah, I haven't made many decisions, or really any that kind of decide the fates of groups of people or the fates of towns. So I don't think I've hit anything that has that kind of gravity
Sure.
yet.
There's a number of story aspects that I'm just really want to know about, but I'm not going to ask you them because I want to save those for myself
Yeah,
and
or you
experience
can
the game.
yes, totally.
But the last question I have about it was how soon did you run into a Deathclaw?
How
Like barring the 8 hours of building your settlement.
yeah,
and
so
that,
just
but
pure gameplay
in
hours.
terms of just in terms of exploring the environment, like how soon was it until you saw one?
I think it was maybe like 5 gameplay hours. Like it was pretty soon. It definitely wasn't like an end game kind of enemy.
No, and was he off in the distance or was he like right in your face?
He was. Let me think. I was sneaking at the time, which I tend to do even out in the open world as I crest over like new hilltops and stuff because you never know what you're going to see. So I remained undetected as I saw them, but I feel like I crested the hill and they were maybe like 30 paces from me, like pretty close, enough to get to me very quickly.
Right.
If they had become aware of me. But yeah, I what did I do? I think I like backed away as far as I could, attempted to get some extra sneak damage while I could, and then the one at least started charging me, and like my bullets were maybe taking away. They were chipping away at its health.
Right.
Let's describe it as chipping.
Well, how many were there? Because you keep saying they.
There were two.
Okay. Well, that's 2 more than you could handle. I mean, in terms of the beginning of the game, that's.
Yeah, so I just ran. I mean, I just
Did you survive?
for it. Yeah, I just ran
Holy
away.
crap!
I know.
That surprises me.
I never let him get close enough to swipe me. That's the thing. I was cowardly, to say the least.
You kind of should be. That's their
Yeah.
goal, is to make you terrified.
Yeah, so the Deathclaw happened pretty quickly.
All right. Well, I think I've gotten a good taste of. Got a good taste of some of the first-hand Fallout 4 knowledge that I wanted so far, but I don't know if there's
I have a
anything
quick
for.
question.
I was going to say, yeah, go ahead because
Yeah.
I wanted to make
By all
sure you
means,
guys
yeah,
got
go
in.
for it.
I guess the one question is how well does the game run? Have you run into any glitches and stuff? Because that's always a concern.
Yeah, it's a very-
people have with
Specifically.
open world games, specifically with the
Yeah.
Bethesda games.
I think this is an interesting. I think we can have a really good conversation about this. So, how does it run? I'll start in general terms. It's the best running Bethesda game I've yet played, and that's always really easy to say in the early hours because typically Bethesda games, at least Skyrim on PS3 is the classic
Right.
example. That game fell apart after 30 hours. Like it just went downhill really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But that hasn't happened in Fallout yet, and it's been pretty consistently the same throughout. Which, when I say consistent, I mean the frame rate is solid. The frame rate really only ever noticeably drops when there are certain particle effects. Like on PS4, for whatever reason, it has trouble with smoke effects. Like the generators in my camp produce kind of a heavy, thick black smoke, and when I get close to that, it really chugs just for the brief instant that I'm looking at it. But out in the world, it's pretty solid. I mean, you do see like the slight dip where if it's at 30 consistently, maybe it falls to like the low 20s as you crest over certain hilltops. I mean, definitely infrequently. It's smooth very consistently 90% of the time. Glitches though, let me think. There's probably been some funny glitches. I'm just trying try and encapsulate them.
And then you don't usually come across those until you've played it for a couple hundred hours when you
you've got to
start
find
seeing
the
some
good
great
stuff.
ones. But
I turned a corner once and there was a bottle of purified water just floating in the air.
nice.
Just like there, just water. There's no ground underneath it, no anything. I've seen there are like elevators and stuff in the game. Like specifically, there are some outdoor elevators. So like I've walked into the elevator and like closed the door, and then dog meat like lagging behind me is just falling off a cliff, trying to get the elevator with me. Stuff like
Nice.
that. I've seen I've seen NPCs kind of jank out when you kill them. Like they'll get caught on a chair, or sometimes they'll like the settlement has produced some funny moments because you have to be careful when you're building it about AI pathing issues. Like I've built stuff, which is fine for me because I can jump, and then I realize that I trapped an NPC on a rooftop and he's trying to get off by like walking on an invisible wall just in place. So I've had to, you can fix that easily. It's actually been impressive as how well the AI can find its way around your best contraptions.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it's been really solid so far. The best performing Bethesda game in terms of glitches and technical things so far. The only, I don't even know if you would call it a game-breaking thing, but there was one time when I spent a good chunk of time, maybe an hour, and like a bunch of retries clearing out a really difficult mutant camp.
Okay.
And I mean, really difficult in the sense that they were all way above my level. Like I shouldn't have been there, but it was the classic Bethesda thing where you can jank your way through it if you're really persistent enough.
Yeah.
So I cleared that, and I fast traveled away and did a couple other things, and then died later, and it brought me back all the way to the save I had made right before the mutant camp, which is just straight up like a game glitch. Like it saves when you fast travel, and it just didn't for me that time. But yeah, in terms of saving, it's like every other Bethesda game where it saves when you wait, it saves when you travel, it saves
Every time you open a door, every time you...
yeah, when you move into new areas. Yep. So yeah, just totally a glitch that reset maybe an hour of progress.
Can you kill all NPCs?
No, you cannot. I haven't tried.
I've tried.
I haven't tried killing like critical, like story NPCs. I've tried killing the people in my encampment. And
good. That's what you should.
Yeah, I was actually murder your own people. The ones that have names I couldn't kill probably because they're needed for quests. But then the ones who moved in later who are just called settler, I could kill those guys. But then the whole camp. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh no, Adam and Ernest, go ahead and if you have anything else you're wondering about the game, go ahead because I like these kind of broad topics like the technical thing because that's such a Bethesda question.
Yeah, and it only actually has a 500 megabyte day one patch, so not too bad.
Yep. Yeah, I had to install that, and that's been ready actually since they sent it to press. Like they told us it was coming, and yeah, sure enough, when we first put the disc in, that 500 meg patch was right there, which. That's not very big, actually, in this day and age.
No,
yeah,
the grand scheme the game is like 50 gigs on your hard drive, so...
I guess if you just want to touch on it quickly, given my lack of experience, and again, Ernest's lack of experience in the series, what is the entry point like? Is it gradual? Is it daunting when you first go in? Is there a good arc to it that wouldn't...
Yeah.
That's to go off of that question, does it clearly define where you need to go right away? Because that's something that I know turned off a number of people in the earlier Fallout games, where you just like did exactly what you said, where like in Fallout 3 there's super mutants on this one side, and if you don't realize you're supposed to go right instead of left, you'll go right into a bunch of super mutants and die right away.
Plus, if I recall, when you walk out of the vault at the beginning of Fallout 3, it's very much just like, welcome, jackass, now go off into the world and do your thing.
Yeah, I remember going to some factory and there were scorpions straight away, and I just got my ass handed to me constantly. Like,
it is so much better. It is so much better in Fallout 4 as an entry point to the series. And I won't go too much into detail about that because it does get into the storytelling, but like your introduction to the apocalypse, like I'll just kind of call it that in vague terms, the way the game eases you into its world and then eases you into the apocalypse and how it happened, or I guess the nuclear fallout and how it happened, it actually is like a story with like an arc, and like you're the character that you created, but you are also a character, and there are certain details that are attached to you more so than Fallout 3, which was you were just the kid who grew up in the vault and your dad, was missing. This there's more that's attached to you as like backstory, and they kind of use that to introduce you not only to your character but then to the world, and then yeah, you do come okay. I don't want to describe too much more than that, but yeah, it's a lot gentler of an entry point than Fallout 3, and actually, yeah, I would say it's a lot closer to Skyrim, because Skyrim had that opening sequence where you were on your way to get executed, and then you kind of got ran through the town with whichever faction you choose to follow, and there's kind of that entry point. It takes it even a little further than that in terms of like dialogue and a story that actually kind of brings you in and introduces you to the world. I think it's really, really good at that.
Awesome.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like...
You've sold me.
Yeah, I mean, can only imagine how it's going to be received critically in the reviews that are going to come up when this podcast goes out, so...
Yeah, which is that's interesting. Yeah, I've been talking to Neil as we play. We've kind of been like swapping not tips, but just like things we've noticed. And hey, have you seen this? Hey, have you seen that? So I don't know. Yeah, it's funny. By the time this podcast is up, his review will be live too. Yeah, how about
Lay the marker?
That score was totally not what I was expecting.
Whoa.
But yeah, it's. Well, I mean, I'll give you my takeaway impression right now. It's fantastic. It's an awesome game. It succeeds in advancing the series forward with modern concepts, like the companions who actually develop a relationship with you. I feel like that's become popularized by games like Mass Effect and by even Skyrim's own modding community.
Sure.
And they've totally embraced that. And then the settlements, I think, are going to blow people away just in terms of... I think some people are just going to spend entire weekends just living in their settlement and decking it out and just being awesome about it, and picking perks that help build your settlement up to a more advanced level. Because there are perks associated with your settlement, so some characters won't have access to the full amount of things you can do with it. So yeah, it's tough. The perks are... they present maybe slightly harder choices, I feel like, than maybe Fallout 3 or Skyrim did.
Man, I can't wait. Like, God, I know a number of people that are just going to be losing their lives to this game.
Oh, can I talk about the graphics really quick?
No.
Well, I just feel like it's gonna
right, because that was something that we brought up before, saying that people were critical of the graphics because they're not up to par in quotes.
Exactly, and I don't think we've heard the last of that conversation. I think people are going to be debating whether it's up to par for the next.
Well,
couple
people
weeks.
always argued that the previous games were never up to par with the other games of the time too. So it's
and that's the weird thing about that is
but nobody talks about it now because of how great those games are.
Right, nobody cares. So, it's totally just
and how broken they are. They have bad graphics and are totally broken, yet people love them to death.
Yeah, and they're timeless and they're masterpieces. I know. So I think the only way in which the graphics have maybe failed to impress me might be in texture resolution. Like when you get up close to this is maybe my classic test is I always look at the ground, I look at the walls, I get right up close to things. But yeah, there are some textures in the game that when you're really up close to them, they are not impressive at all. Like they could be textures from the PS3 era, but then you back out and you compare screenshots of Fallout 3 to screenshots of Fallout 4. Just like character models and facial expressions and the really soft lighting from the sun, which is one thing I think they've done really well here. It's night and day. I mean, you can't argue that it's such a huge leap over their last generation of Fallout 3 specifically and Skyrim. It looks better than Skyrim in every single respect. But I mean, you stand it up to a game like The Witcher, which is probably the best looking game I've ever seen, and it doesn't look as good, and it's tempting to compare it on that basis alone, but I always remind myself, every time you step out into Fallout's world, you move from an interior building to the outdoor space, the entire world is loaded around you, And every single object you can touch, you can interact with, every single person has dialogue to tell you. The AI cycles for every NPC in the world is essentially running. I mean, there's probably some proximity dealing with that, but all these routines, the locations that you dropped things. There's just so much going on there that it's from a technological perspective, it's amazing for that reason alone. So yeah, it does get a little bit of a pass for like things like, sure, the textures. Some of the textures have a low resolution and could be more detailed, but it's such a different game than anything else that's out there.
Yeah. Awesome. Well,
yep.
I'm sure you've already read the review on our site by now when you're hearing this, but I don't know. I don't know about the rest of you guys, but man, I can't wait.
I'll get it in the new year when I have more time.
Right. Yeah. Holiday is going to be a good time to be able to dive right into this.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, most def.
All right. Well, that has been our lengthy podcast this week.
This is
for a week that
seemed
for a week that seemed like it didn't have a ton of news in it. We sure had a lot to talk about.
Right, because I reminded you that the Fallout embargo would be up by the time the podcast
went live. Yeah, we originally were just gonna mention the trailer and then. Nope.
Sorry for dominating the second half of this podcast, by the way.
Oh, it's arguably the biggest game of the year. It deserves it.
Well, now we gotta wrap up our show here and do it as we always do with announcing the games that are coming out the week of the podcast release. And number one coming out on November 10th is Fallout 4.
What's
so
that? Are you guys going to play that one?
Kyle, you want to talk a little bit about Fallout 4? So we know?
Yo, read the back of box synopsis for me.
Is that another mobile game?
I need to know what this one's about.
So that's November 10th in North America and Europe. Is coming out on PS4.
Oh, don't forget, everyone who's listening to this, if you're buying Fallout 4, be sure to download the free Fallout 4 Pip-Boy app on your phone, because you can access your inventory and your map and all your quests from your phone while you're playing and while you're out and about doing non-playing things. You can, examine weapons and stuff. But yeah, you get it.
Fallout's invading people's lives in so many ways now. So the other game coming out on November 10th is Let's Sing.
Yes.
Coming out in North America. It already came out in Europe before, but I don't know, guys. That might be a serious contender with Fallout 4.
I think it could put a serious dent into Fallout 4's potential sales, but I guess we'll see. It has its audience, so.
Yeah, I don't know, but
wait, Let's Sing. Is this like a SingStar type game?
I would imagine. Yeah, I'd imagine so. I don't know an awful lot about it.
I feel like we're not giving Let's Sing a fair shake.
Right. It's I don't know. I don't know how we're not, because we're only talking about Fallout 4 in comparison. But
that's true.
But yeah, so those are the two games that are going to be coming out November 10th. You can look forward to. I'm guessing a fair share of you might be looking forward towards one a little bit more, but.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting though when you read the list, because most weeks you just kind of assume that there are like 5 or 6 games coming out that no one's ever heard of on different platforms, but this week it's like, nope, it is just Fallout 4. Everyone got out of
it. Clear the way.
Yeah, the skis
running with their tails between their legs. Yeah. So I mean, you got this whole week just to only experience Fallout 4 and sing about it. So there you go.
Yes.
All right, so thank you for listening to episode 5 of PlayStation Fixed. It's been a long one. But yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for all of you guys for joining me this week.
Anytime.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Yeah.
It's been nice. It's been good to have all 4 of us on the same show.
And it won't be the last.
Yeah, so we're going to be coming back next week with a lot more news to talk about and other games to talk about. We're going to have a couple of review topics to talk about. My review got switched of Need for Speed will be up in time for our podcast next week. Ernest will be able to talk about Black Ops 3.
Yep.
Either you two doing?
I will find something to talk about. In terms of reviews, no, I don't have anything in the pipeline.
Yeah,
just
I don't.
yet,
Yeah.
So.
Maybe
Soon.
I might hit you up with Final Fantasy XIV patch 3.1 impressions, because I think that's coming out next Tuesday. Because I think there's a maintenance period. And I haven't played the game in like 3 months, so this will be an interesting step back. But
Man, I haven't played it in like 5, and it's eating away at me.
Don't worry, guys. You have Fallout. It's okay.
This is true.
There's a reason for it.
All right, so we got a lot more news and stuff to talk to you about next week. So thank you all for watching and staying tuned to PlayStation Fix. We'll see you next week.
Bye.